Hi, my name is Bianca Pisciola. I am the Chief Operating Officer at SIX, and I'm so pleased to be here today for today's Women in Mining panel. I'm also pleased to announce that this is the first of a multi-part event, so stay tuned for the second part of our Women in Mining panel, which will be announced in May. As a reminder, throughout the event, you can ask questions in the Q&A tab on the right-hand side of your screen, and we'll be addressing them at the end. And let's get started. Now, these ladies need no introduction, but I'll let them introduce themselves anyway. Why don't we start with Vanessa for a brief introduction and an explanation as to how and why did you get your start in the mining sector?
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Bianca. It's great to be here on a Friday morning. It's not really spring outside in Vancouver just yet, but we have hope. I actually started in the mining industry 18 years ago. And it was a total fluke. I was in the film industry. I moved from Toronto to Vancouver. Film was in a huge downturn. And I got offered a job to help this company that had just gone public. They needed someone who had office experience. I had office experience to just help them out right before Roundup and PDAC. Well, 4 months later, my boss looks at me and goes, well, I'm going to have to give you a title and some options. And that really started my career in IR. So I didn't mean to be in mining, but I've just, throughout my career, I've worked with some really great people and just on great exploration projects. And now I work for Orezone Gold Corporation, and we're building the Bambore Gold Project in Burkina Faso.
Excellent. I'll pass it over to you, Siloni.
Thank you, Bianca, and thank you to my peers and everyone attending today. My name is Siloni Waraich. I consider myself a COVID economy statistic. I fell into mining because of timing and opportunity. I have a long career in the public sector, home building. I've, forayed into agriculture, have worked with not-for-profits with a focus on regulatory affairs, sustainability, and governance. So I think well poised for where we're at. And now I'm proudly working for the sister companies of Ion Energy, Aranjan Resources, and Step Gold. What was only supposed to be for a couple of months. I'm still here, surviving, thriving, learning, and enjoying every second of it.
Wonderful. And I'll pass it over to you, Brenda. I think we might need to pass it over to Anne in the meantime, if you don't mind.
No problem. Good morning and thanks, Bianca. Real pleasure to be here. I'm Anne Lewis. I'm the Executive Director of Yukon Mining Alliance and the founder and current president of Yukon Women in Mining. My mining history goes back a few generations. I have Cornish tin miners in my history and miners that moved around from Cornwall to Africa, Ontario, and then to the Yukon in the 80s. I grew up in it. My dad's a reclamation specialist. Both my parents worked with Indigenous communities across the north to create economic development and opportunities. But I grew up not thinking that mining was a career option, and it wasn't presented to me. So it was exciting when I came back to the Yukon and ended up in a career in training and education as the bridge between government, industry, and Indigenous groups. And then I moved into my role with Yukon Mining Alliance doing investment. And the big thing that I took kind of from start to finish for me is that inclusion is a pretty critical part. And so I certainly learned that from my family and then the people moving on. So with Yukon Women in Mining, Yukon Mining Alliance, that's where I get to hang out today.
Amazing. Hoping Brenda can rejoin us in a moment. But while we're waiting, I just wanted to get right into it. The statistic is that 1 in 5 mining leaders are women. And so I ask of you guys, what are some of the benefits, but also the challenges of working in the mining sector as a woman?
The mining industry is it's so great. I feel like I have family all over the world. Yes, we don't see as many C-suite women in mining. And I think that's a real opportunity. But I think we came from, when I started in this industry back in 2004, it wasn't so far. The gold was just starting to rise again after the late 90s and BRIEX. and everyone was holding their cards so close to their chest. They were hoarding information. And when I started in that era where people were still hoarding their information. People thought that gave them a competitive edge. And so I think it was a little bit, it was hard to see women at the start in mining. I was very lucky. I started off with a great young group. And we kind of grew up together in mining, learning about it and forging ahead. So the benefit of being a woman in mining is, I think the benefit that it is for all of us, any sex included, is the people that you meet, the relationships you form, and how you help people get ahead.
Absolutely. I would love to pose the question to you as well, Brenda, but also to get a brief introduction. Glad to have you back. So the question is the benefits and I feel you. That is the joy of being online. So the question is the benefits and the challenges of being in the mining sector, but also a brief introduction from you would be fantastic.
Sure. Thank you so much for including me in today's panel. I've been in the mining space for about 15 years, previously in banking and insurance, and sort of morphed into this by happenstance. I've spent the last 15 years, I started in mostly corporate governance and have sort of morphed into what is now a completely corporate communications, investor relations role. When I look at my career so far, I've been very fortunate to have lots of very strong women leaders to model after, and I hope that now I can take the opportunity to become one of those.
Absolutely. One of the interesting concepts that we were talking earlier, as you can imagine, we had a chance to do a few tech checks, and so we've kind of done a few different discussions about this in the context of having these early chats. We were all chatting as a group about the idea of collaboration and how that's changed, especially in the mining sector over the years. Would love to hear more about that and also the role that women have played in that shift towards collaboration.
Me?
Yeah,
Sorry.
absolutely.
So it's interesting because, even in my career in banking, I've never thought of myself as a female first. I've always thought of myself as an employee doing what I do. In mining, there's so many little mini organizations that are specific to women to allow us to have the opportunity to influence one another, to share ideas, to collaborate. That is actually a relatively industry-specific thing that I've become aware of. In insurance, there wasn't really, or banking even, there wasn't specific women in mining groups. I've enjoyed the camaraderie. The fact is that when we go and do our job, whether we're a girl or a boy, it shouldn't matter. But it is, when you work in a predominantly male industry, it's nice to be able to share your experiences with other people that are like-minded. And I think that that's really valuable when it comes time to learn and benefit from our relationships.
Mm-hmm. I'll throw this to Anne as well, because I know this is an area that we were discussing previously.
Yeah, thanks, Bianca. I'm loving the start of this panel. It really kind of shows me the difference. You and I have done a lot of these. I think we all have, and the difference, hosting a women in mining panel versus hosting a mining panel where it's predominantly men. We're all creating a lot of space for the other person to jump in first, and I think that's one of the things that women, really bring a big difference to the sector and to all sectors when you have inclusion. Is creating space, and as soon as you do that, you've got a greater opportunity for collaboration and for different approaches and different voices. Very often, the biggest voices rise to the top the fastest, and they're just being heard. And so, when I think about the first thing you said about 1 in 5 leaders in mining are women. That's a big part of it, is using your voice. And, as soon as you do that, you have more opportunity to be recognized. And then the more women you have at the table, you're actually creating more space for people who are not the extrovert, who are not self-promoters. And I don't mean self-promotion in any way as a negative thing. I think it's a super critical piece of the puzzle for women and women advancing in the sector. And I think that's where you get that greater collaboration. I think I'm on year 12 officially in the sector. And, that part has been probably the most important to me, was seeing the collaboration. And the industry is required to collaborate so extensively and to reach out, not just amongst itself, but the work you do in communities and with Indigenous people and with governments and with the supply service sector. And the more we do that, the more progressive this sector gets.
Absolutely. There's a few different things that people think about when they think about women in the mining sector. But I'm curious, on your side, what patterns are you guys recognizing insofar as women at work, and any advice or things that you think that they ought to be doing within the sector? I'll pass it over to Vanessa to start.
I was thinking about this right before we started. I'm like, patterns. And I was thinking about my own life and my career. And I think we sometimes as women have a tendency to be either too quiet or too loud. Too quiet because, that imposter syndrome, or, you're in the room with predominantly males in the finance industry. I don't find it as much on exploration sites. I find that it's a very good mix of female and male, but you're either too quiet because you don't feel like you have a voice, or you're too loud because you really just want to get heard and you haven't been heard. So I find that that's something I've noticed as a pattern in myself as well. And I have to remind myself that, listening and being quiet and reading the room is, I hate to say it's called women's intuition and all that, but I really do truly believe that I have a better ability by being quiet sometimes in meetings to read reactions, to gather information, and then I speak when it's necessary, like necessary for me, not just because I want to put my finger in there and just be like, hey, I'm here, but because I know and I've been listening more. Anyways, those are patterns I've noticed in myself.
I'll pass it over to you, Siloni, because I know you're coming from a bit of a different background too. So looking at the patterns you're recognizing coming into this space, and any advice that you would give.
Thanks, Bianca. I think there's a couple of different themes. I mean, I'm going to pick from an earlier question that you'd thrown out and we hadn't fully gone around, which is the benefits in the mining sector and seeing that sustainability. And I think that our women's instinct, our strength around, and we've seen this around public policy leaders, around seeing the impact in local communities and forging ahead with innovations and the collaboration piece. I think the biggest benefited opportunity for the younger folks coming into the sector is around the sustainability piece, whether they are in working on the site or in corporate, and giving that lens. There's no, that is I think the largest opportunity in terms of observations that I'm seeing. It is definitely the collaborative. Up until a few hours ago, I kept saying when I was speaking to people, I'm not even a woman in mining. I can't believe they asked me to speak. But I am. I spend the majority of my hours and days supporting great projects and companies. And I'm learning along the way, but owning it and being there. And so in that process of accepting, I went out and reached out to marketing partners and said, I need to talk to some ladies. I need to talk to some legitimate women in mining. And the collaborative nature, the open, accessible nature that females bring to these conversations, people at CEO level, women at CEO level, returned my email within minutes, were available for calls last night, gave me their thoughts, took the time, were accessible. And I've seen that through my career and benefited from that. So there's definitely that. But it's also owning. I'll make one last point. I think women still need to own their space and accept that they deserve to be at the table. There's so many times in my career so far where I've always been like, oh, I'll laugh at that inappropriate joke because I'm just so lucky to be at the table. Forget about the fact that I'm eminently qualified, but oh my God, we need to get over that feeling, right? Of we need to allow others to make jokes, belittle, and feel like we deserve to be in this space and at this table. And I have a few other comments, but I'll save them for other parts, but it is related to the performance, right? I think that we let, in our sector and other sectors, the red herring distract us around pick the best person for the job. Are you implying that the women that are CEOs are not the best people for the job? So I just think that there's so much we can do better ourselves around acceptance and embracing, right?
Absolutely. You know, something I love that you said earlier was about the idea of the support systems that we build in recognizing other women within the sector and how tremendously helpful they've been to us. And I feel the exact same way. If you guys wouldn't mind, before we jump into the next question, I would love to take a brief pause just to give you guys an opportunity to shout out any women in mining who have been instrumental in your lives, any women even adjacent to this space. I think it'd be a really awesome opportunity to highlight them. So anyone that comes to mind, I mean, Vanessa, if you have someone who comes to mind, I'll throw it up to you first.
Well, honestly, Anne is pretty instrumental. I worked in the Yukon for about 14 years in my career. And when Anne started like the Yukon Mining Alliance, literally, I was so blown away. She is so qualified, and she wrangled some of the like grittiest people all together, took us around the world, and really gave Yukon a place in the industry. Also say that I worked with one of the best geologists I've ever worked with, Julia Lane. Unfortunately, not with us anymore, but she was the youngest like VPX, female VPX, running like $50 million programs. And the girl had it dialed and really taught me so much. And then there's so many IR women out there, you know, Liz Monger, Nicole Holler, Lindsay Wilson, Karen Davies, like they've all shaped me, and they are such a big support system for me every day. There doesn't go a day by where I can't text any of these women in mining and ask a question. And Kendra Johnston. Now that's a woman in mining that's top notch.
I think, I mean, this list of shout outs and thanks be that's lovely. I've obviously learned so much from you. You took me under your wing in the Yukon early. And so I appreciated that. Julia Lane, I just had the utmost respect for. She made geology accessible. As far as I'm concerned, when the geologists talk, it may as well be Vulcan, and I appreciate their technical expertise so much, but I have no idea what they're saying. So that was a real superpower of Julia's and the whole Archer Cathro team with Heather Burrell. I was really lucky. I got to start under, Sue Craig, who's a Women in Mining Canada trailblazer, and Ira Thomas. So I got some access to some big badass names with real history and real and their approaches, were so different and so powerful. And one of the things I really loved and learned from them, and I'm going to add one more name to that, is Wendy Taylor, who owns El Canera, a big charter company here in the Yukon and in Nanaimo. All three have this real incredible quiet power. And what I mean by quiet power is when they step into a space, they own it, and people recognize that. And they've never demanded it. I probably had to, maybe early on in their careers. I am meeting them as established women in industry, and I really valued seeing that, and seeing that there was kind of uncompromising feminine power in their approach to the industry. And I hope I got to take that forward from the start. So that was a really unique place. But the list of women in mining is pretty epic. But I'll hand it over to the other two.
I would just shout out Andre Saint-Germain. I worked with her, I guess I met her probably 12 years ago, so early on in my tenure in the space. And we worked together side by side for many years at a company in California. Her determination and feistiness was a real inspiration. She didn't ever shy away from walking up to anyone at a boardroom table or at a conference, or she just had so much charisma and confidence. I've learned a lot just from being in her presence.
I was going to jump back in. I know that I had brought up that theme. And even though I am the newbie, ironically, and this is why relationships are so important to our career paths, one of the most instrumental mentors that I've had is someone that is well accomplished, that was educated as a geologist, was just inducted into the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame this year, but was also a leader on the regulatory side as the head of Ontario Securities Commission, and that's Maureen Jensen. And that's an example where she didn't know me. I was introduced to her many years ago, and yet she still found time for me, invited me into her office, actively recommended me for opportunities, and takes my call when I say I need advice on governance. She does a lot of board work, and she has been, even without knowing that I would be here in this sector actively, has been instrumental in my growth as a professional.
Amazing. No, this is fantastic. And I appreciate you guys playing ball with an impromptu question, but I thought it begged to be asked, especially in this with this topic. So talking a little bit, we talked about patterns, we talked about collaboration. Looking back at your own history and the things that you've done within your careers, are there any things that you would do differently, or any mistakes that you feel like you've made that you would rethink this time around, knowing what you know now? I'll pass around to Anne to start.
Thanks, Bianca. This is one that we were 10 minutes out from the start of the webinar, and I texted and then called Vanessa because I was like, what mistakes are we willing to talk about online? So we had like a quick tete-a-tete. One of the ones, that I had kind of early on was the need to defend the industry that I was in and to rationalize why I chose mining. And that really said a lot about the state of the people's perception of the industry. But, it kind of bled into a few other areas where I found myself over explaining myself why I thought something was a good idea, or why I thought something was important, or what, on those things. And I think, that's a pretty strong characteristic of a lot of women. I think, we say our opinion and then we back up our opinion with 5 to 10 facts and figures to try and add validity to it. And so, that's one of the things I've tried to make a fairly conscious adjustment as I've advanced in my career, is that, I do know what I'm talking about when I say I know what I'm talking about. And I'm very quick to say, I don't know anything about that, or I don't know enough about that. And I think, women are pretty good at doing that and not taking, too much liberty or too much credit where it shouldn't be. And, owning the opportunity to share your voice without the rationalization of the defending. And yeah, that's what I learned early on. I think one of the other things was, know who your allies are. It's really important, whether you call them mentors or allies or friends. And in this industry, I think a lot of us are more like family. You can navigate a lot of challenging situations if you surround yourself with people that have got your back and that you can trust. And I would say that, I didn't do it quite fast enough. I rolled it alone, for the first few years. And then, like I said, I had people like Vanessa and Chris Donaldson and Liz and a few others really take me under the wing. But I also had just a really engaged board at Yukon Mining Alliance, CEOs of companies who took a 23-year-old on the road and trusted me to get a lot done. So I'm so grateful for those allies and family.
I'll pass it over to Brenda.
Well, I think probably the mistake I made was that I didn't give myself enough credit. I would sit quietly at the table because I was the only female and didn't believe that my voice had equal value. So it took some time, and I'm sure that even today I still struggle with that in certain occasions. But just I didn't believe that I had enough experience or enough value to speak up. And I think probably the second mistake, and I work really hard not to make this now, is that I would not be as supportive to other women because I felt like I needed to, keep my space. And that's a mistake. And so now I spend a lot of my energies helping other females in the industry learn and develop and come along. I would hope that my peers would say this, but I tend to be very supportive of women in mining now. So as far as mistakes go, if we learn from them, then they're learning opportunities. They're opportunities for us to develop and grow. So hopefully I've taken those mistakes and done something positive with them.
Yeah, it's so true. There is a sort of implicit understanding, especially in the early days, that there can only be one of us or so many of us, and by raising other folks up, you might lose your spot. I think that's a really relatable feeling. I'll pass it over to you, Siloni.
Thanks, Bianca. I think as a carryover from a theme that I had mentioned earlier, which is normalizing, embracing, owning, and that is really around diversity and femininity, and not just my own, but on behalf of women. One example on the diversity piece, I was an elected official at a very young age, and one of the first things that happened was we had to select, it's like any other board, subcommittee, committee preferences. What was not on my list of preferences? Affirmative Action Committee, and that's what they used to call it. And guess what my first assignment was? Because I brought the youth card, I'm clearly not white, and I was female in a smaller community. Did I speak up and say I don't want that? No, I just smiled and took it, right? And yeah, I am. But it was a token committee and it was a token position, right? And on the femininity piece, I think that's really important. And I know times are changing, and I hope my mother is not on this webinar, but I'm just going to say it. I have boobs. I have really big boobs. And why is that relevant? For two reasons. When I was a senior executive networking, there were men that still showed no shame at events and had no problem checking it out while speaking to me and not looking at my eyes, and me not calling anybody out on that kind of landscape or environment. But the second piece is very practical, and I know others had brought this up in our pre-conversation. I can't wear a suit. It does not fit me properly. It doesn't look good. So when I was told when I was in a senior high profile role that for my headshots, I needed to put a suit on, or I needed to wear, less flowery things and certain subdued colors, or something that wouldn't bring attraction to my femininity. I don't think that's okay. And obviously the world has changed. But I wish that I had, basically said, no, that's not all right. And I'm going to continue to wear my bright pink dresses and my bright red lipstick. And, this is what I am. I am a woman, and proudly, and this is how I want to dress. And each of us needs to embrace our identity and not try to be like what was the historical establishment.
Absolutely. Over to you, Vanessa.
Oh, that was great, Siloni. Just the whole idea of finding, when I started, also, you have to wear a suit. I didn't fit suits well. They didn't make them in my size. It was a whole part of image. And if you want a seat at the boardroom table, you have to look like you belong there. And it took me a long time, probably too long, to find my style and to find my voice. Everyone knows that a lot of people know that I'm sarcastic and humorous, and using those as defense mechanisms, even when, another point I wrote down was staying places where I wasn't wanted or respected, in terms of being at, the old boys club, being out at receptions or anything, and listening to, kind of really off color, off base comments, and staying there and laughing it off because I didn't have my own personality, because I was told that I had to conform. And I think one of the things that I know is different about females joining the industry now, and anyone joining in the industry now, is that I think there's just a lot more individuality to go around. So my biggest thing is staying where I wasn't wanted or respected, and not speaking up soon enough, because I didn't do myself any favors, and I certainly didn't do any of the females around me or the females that came after me any favors. So, and no lessons were taught.
No, fair enough. I think it's really interesting because I think that coming into this industry, we also take cues looking at who's surrounding us, the women and the men, but what's acceptable and what's tolerable, and what is the correct behavior to succeed in this industry. And the explicit and implicit understandings there, I think, take a lot of time to unlearn, certainly. I have another question for you folks, but if it's okay with you guys, I'm thinking, why don't we jump to some of the submitted questions for now, and then we can save that one for the end. So we have a whole host of questions. I'll start with one submitted by Eric from GR Silver. He says, at a time when the industry and the demands on it are rapidly expanding, it's crazy not to tap into the deep pool of talent represented by this panel today. How do we help the industry recognize that opportunity and tap into that more? Example, overcoming the imposter syndrome. See, it's from Eric. I will throw it to Brenda to start.
How did I know that you were going to do that? Interesting question. And in fact, Eric and I have actually spoken about this before. I'm a mother first, obviously, and raising two young, strong, independent women is a good start, because my girls don't go into a boardroom with the same fears and concerns that I was raised with. So I think as the next generation starts developing, those women will present themselves differently than perhaps the women on this panel. And I think it is giving the opportunity to females, not just because they're female, but because they haven't been given the opportunity previously. And, we've talked about this on our pre-call, just about the fact that being appointed to a board or being appointed in a management team because you're female doesn't hit right. You want to be appointed because you're the best candidate. And I think as we continue this growth pattern and involving more females around the boardroom table, it will just become a natural progression, and it will not be, we have to have 40% female. Otherwise, we don't meet the criteria for this investor package or something. So I think it's a moment in time where we have the opportunity to both create leadership in the younger generation, but also to open our eyes and ensure that we're taking all the opportunities that are presented.
Absolutely. Any thoughts on your end, Anne?
Yeah, I mean, I think imposter syndrome is something that all women feel when, a lot of the time, but also it really comes out in a male-dominated industry. I think one of the really biggest pieces for me was, and I would say this, it can be hard if that's always in a mentor-mentee dynamic. And so, I know that there's a lot of effort at the senior leadership table to look around and to build systems up. But, where I found a lot of my strength and got over a lot of that imposter syndrome was creating the network around me that would make a big deal. And I had a huge shift. So a few years in, I think I was a year or two in Yukon Mining Alliance, and all of my time was being spent with the CEOs of the organization. And, they were amazing. And the information I was able to grab from them was great. But there was, I was always pretty nervous and very respectful of the positions they had. So, it didn't leave me as much comfortability to ask questions. But what did start to happen was the investor relations and corporate development people for those companies, I started looking to them, and we built this really just intangibly amazing crew that when we walked into, a room at shows, people kind of knew who we were. And that was the opportunity to go, hey, Vanessa, someone's asking me this question, how do I approach that? Or, Chris Donaldson or Liz Munger. And that was really critical to jumping over the imposter syndrome pieces for me, is having that safe place to ask tough questions, to ask awkward questions, even questions in the morning, back to Siloni's comment about what we're wearing, how dressy are we? How high are your heels on this one? Because we want that feminine power, but we also, want to be really respectful of our positions. And we know that what we wear is going to be judged, and, we can all say it doesn't matter, but we're intimately aware of it every single time. And so, that power in numbers of knowing who the people are around you. And so I would say, if you're in a leadership position, Eric, or companies that are in leadership positions, make sure that the network is being supported at all levels throughout, and that people have an opportunity to build a culture where they can learn from someone that's just a step ahead of them, and just a step below and coming up from them, so that you've got that continuous feedback of support and upgrade. So that would kind of be where I would address imposter syndrome.
Yeah, go for it, Siloni. Oh, no, Vanessa, you too. Yeah, go for it.
Find your allies, like Anne said, and we all said. Find your people and grow your group and be open. And also, you don't have to be, I don't want to be a president or a CEO of a company. That's just me, and that's fine for me. Find the people that have those skills. Find the people that have the answers. Anne is very politically minded. Me, not so much. I can ask Anne about this. You don't have to be the master of everything. Use your support systems, use your groups to gain knowledge so that you are coming from informed positions. People like to be leaned on, and they love to help, I find, as soon as you ask the question. So don't silo yourself away. Use, like Eric, who asked the question. He's one of my mentors in the industry. When I first started, he was a mining analyst at that time, and he taught me how to speak to mining analysts, he and Michael Gray. And they took the time to teach this kid who had no idea, who came from the film and music industry, to ask certain questions or to present certain information. So use your groups, your crews, your allies for all sorts of things, and lean on each other. And I guess that's how you get over imposter syndrome and start to, you're also, it goes back to Anne's point about publicizing yourself to promote yourself. You do that by getting people to know you and to provide information. That's kind of what I think.
My response is going to be obviously a continuation of the same theme. We know it. It's human nature. One of my good friends, who's also one of my best business development sources, had posted recently, surround yourself with women who would mention your name in a room full of opportunities. But it's not just women, it's men. And in fact, it's ironic that Eric is the one that sent in that question, because I had his name in my notes. I had the privilege of moderating a roundtable that he was a member of. And I remember his words, and we need more male leaders that are progressive, that have been out there publicly saying we lack diversity, we need more, we're having a hard time recruiting and retaining, let's all work together to get there. But on a personal level, we need the male leadership, we need allies at every level. And it's not just about mentorship. It's not about background advice only, it's about sponsorship. You need to surround yourself with people that are going to give you those opportunities, which validate and will help you get over whatever fears we have, which are natural. It's instinctual, very much so.
Agreed. It is funny that Eric was the one to ask this question, because I don't think he even knows this, but a while ago, maybe almost a year and a half, 2 years ago, when the summits at Six were still kind of new, I actually hosted every single summit. You may remember that back in the day. Now I'm very grateful that we have Dasha and Cam hosting the majority of them. A special shout out to Dasha, who's behind the scenes helping with this. But Eric was a panelist on a summit, and I was still feeling very much the imposter syndrome of hosting these events with these experts. And he was so tremendously kind and helpful and knowledgeable. And I think meeting someone for the first time, whether it's digital or in person, and treating them as if they have the knowledge, the authority, that they're capable, I think is just the baseline, and it helps create, I think, that feeling of confidence to overcome those feelings, that imposter syndrome. I think Eric played a role in that for me, certainly, as did many others. So thank you for your question, Eric. I'll pass it over to a question submitted by Jessica. And she's asking, what are some of the challenges you may have faced early in your mining career versus today, assuming these challenges have changed quite a bit? I'll start with Vanessa this time around.
Challenges I faced, I feel like I've addressed some of them, but it's definitely being one of the only females in the room and kind of being treated as more of a secretary and less as a player on the team. And now I would like to say that the bosses that I've worked for, the presidents and the CEOs that I've worked for, the male ones, they have never made me feel that way. It's people in other areas, like in finance or wherever. So that would be one of mine, I guess. Yeah.
I have kind of a funny practical one. I got this question earlier this week. And, sometimes the challenges are just really practical things, and just owning them. And so, I remember it was one of my very first investor tours for Yukon Mining Alliance. 20 mining media analysts, investors come to the territory and tour around. So there's 20 guys. We're standing on an airfield, and we've been there a little while waiting for our charter plane. And, pretty easy for these guys to go and find their favorite tree and sort their business. And there's me, I'm 24, 25-year-old, the only woman. We're above tree line. And so I had to just very honestly say, you guys should check out that mountain range over there for a moment, and turn the other way. And I just had to own the moment that being a woman in the industry at that second was different, and that it was fine. And it actually turned into a bit of a hilarious thing because, I ducked behind some jet fuel barrels that went off and they all turned around and waved, and then I waved at them. But these are the things as a woman in mining, there are things that are different, and it's fine. And, owning some of those moments and just, you got to laugh at yourself a little bit as well, and recognize that, there are differences, and you can own some power in those pieces too, and have a laugh at it. So it doesn't all have to be serious. Not all of these challenges are things that we're going to address, because it's just part of being a woman, and that's kind of awesome and badass too. So yeah, Jessica, that would be one of mine.
I'll pass it over to you, Brenda.
Well, I would say that the fact that there's more of us now, and that we talk to one another, we share our experiences and our stories, I think that makes us better. When I first started, there wasn't the same number of women in mining, and so you felt solitary. And now I feel like I'm part of a community, and I value that, and I think that makes me a better employee for my company.
Over to you, Siloni.
I think with any challenge or opportunity and professional growth, maturity plays a big role in that. And so, some of the examples I already gave around experiences when I was younger and making it around why is this happening to me and why are people saying that and not doing anything about it. The big difference now is I feel that with all the opportunities I've had, that I have a sense of ownership in being part of the solution now. I look forward to a day where we don't need these panels, where it's not a big deal to have women in leadership, and that the numbers, data speaks volumes. And so I look forward to that day, but we have a lot to talk about and a lot to do to get there. And I just feel like a personal investment in making sure that I'm now part of the solution instead of just complaining about it.
Absolutely. Speaking of that transformation, we have a question here from Daniela. She says, as this event is called Women in Mining, Champions of Change, what transformative changes do you each hope to make within your companies? We'll start with, why don't we start with Brenda this time?
What change would I like to see? Well, our company currently, we have about 40% of our geologists are female in Mexico, and our staff complement overall is about 30% female. I am currently the only female on the management team, so I think if I was to be able to grow that number, I would feel success. And not for any other reason, but it would be nice to have some other like-minded females around the boardroom table.
Do you mind if I jump in?
Yeah, no, I was going to call to you.
I work for 3 sister companies based out of Mongolia, and I am proud to say the one that is operational and a producer, 60% of their management team, Step Gold, are women. And I think that's fantastic. That being said, and with my purely governance and regulatory background, more women at the board level, very much so, right? And we need women at all decision-making levels in order for this to improve the state, and especially in a world, once again, where sustainability, investor focus is on ESG. The G part of ESG is governance. Where are the diversity of perspectives around those boardroom tables? And so I will keep fighting that fight on a very company-specific level, and they are receptive. That's why I'm still here. I'd like to think we all choose to be working with the same people that share the same values. It's just going to take time getting there, and I hope it happens sooner than later.
I was going to say that my company, I feel at home at any seat that I take at the table. I'm included, but in the industry at large, I would like to see at conferences, especially, I would like to see more female speakers and representation, and I think that's a really big part that we can fill. And so that's what I would like to help change going forward, because it's starting to make me mad to see very just old white guys speaking again. And I have to say that. So that's what I hope to help affect change and to help, to help mentor people females that would want to, or have a place to speak at conferences as leaders that we look up to.
Thanks, Daniela, for this question. I think there are so many different ways to do this. Inclusion is something that I have felt is at my core for a long time. It's, it was the way I was raised. My parents were in the community all the time. So I was raised in very small towns, surrounded by the values and culture of Yukon First Nations and Indigenous people. I'm from the north in small towns, so inclusion and collaboration is a big piece of that. And so for me, Yukon Mining Alliance, it's a nonprofit organization, and it is supported by my company. And one of the biggest things that I've just really had the honor of doing is building an incredible team. The team of women that I have working with me, Lynette Jansen, who's, Yukon Mining Alliance's projects and membership manager. She's been in the industry only 2 years, and she is just so passionate and so engaged. And I absolutely love answering her questions and really challenging her to step up as well, and creating space. Bonnie Dixon, and then there's been some other new players, and I make a pretty concentrated effort to look around the room and to see who's there, and to see who could use a shout out, who could you throw a question to and create space for them to answer something. And you do have to be pretty intentional about it at this stage. We were talking about diversity quotients, and people get really uncomfortable with diversity quotients. And, you can get into trouble with them for sure in terms of tokenism and putting people on boards just for the sake of filling a checkbox. But where there's opportunity in them is that what they do is they create and they almost force people to take that extra second, that sober second thought, and not just to grab the first 9 people around them, which are probably men. When you do that, you notice someone else in the room. And in this case, it could be a woman, or it could be an Indigenous person, or another minority, depending on where in the world you're looking. And so that, I think, is important from that perspective, but really making sure that you're recognizing those people's skills and creating that space, I think, is a pretty exciting thing. And I think, Daniela, the most important thing is I think we are seeing transformative change. These panels are popping up all the time. And I think globally, the world is talking about women and talking about inclusion and all of the people and the respect we need to have for diverse opinions. So I don't think it could be a more exciting time to take a step forward for the sector. And the sector, I think, is actually embracing it. So I think it's an exciting time.
I absolutely agree. Folks, we have so many questions. I'm so grateful for it. It was funny. We said in a tech check, this might not take the full hour. And now I'm trying to figure out ways in which I can ask as many questions in the 6 or so minutes we have left. But I do see a few questions around education, so I'm going to try my best to combine the thoughts here. Marianne says, I've been following trends in education, and I'm seeing low enrollment in geology in general in Canada, but this trend is really going to impact the proportion of women coming into the field. What would you say to young women students to encourage them to join the field of mining or geology, and what makes it attractive for you? And simultaneously, we also have a similar question from Randy, who says, what would you highlight to a classroom of grade 10 to 12 students who don't know about the careers and opportunities that exist?
This is a great question.
Right.
There are so many opportunities. I didn't know that growing up in Winnipeg, I didn't, excuse me, I didn't know that mining wasn't an option. I didn't even know about the industry. I know that I learned about geology in school, but that's all I knew. Sorry. I didn't know that there was everything from being in the field, being technical, being at a mine, being an operator, being in communications, being a lawyer. There are so many different ways to be in mining, and I think that there are so many opportunities, and it's not just what you think going out into the field. That's one part of it, a very huge part of it, but there's finance, and there's so many suppliers that work with mining. I think that we feed a lot of mouths from our industry, and we get to see a lot of the world. And if you have that traveling spirit, or you want to grow your group nationally, globally, looking at mining is a great career. I wish I had known about it when I was younger.
I'm crazy passionate about this particular topic. This is the whole reason UConn Women in Mining started. For us, it was this huge education gap in terms of talking about mining and in terms of talking about industry in the private sector. For a very long time, we have promoted some very specific careers: doctors, lawyers, teachers, nurses. And, promoting business, promoting industries, sharing that information with youth, and just being really passionate about why you do the work that you do. We have this big shift, a generational shift in, you don't go to work from 9 to 5 to go to work from 9 to 5 for 20 years. People are chasing dreams, and they're just wildly passionate about it. And so, tapping into that and sharing that passion, I think, is a really key part of this. I do think that there is some ownership that governments need to take in addressing curriculum gaps. We need to be training youth for the future right now, and probably yesterday. People need to know about budget and finance and credit, and that entrepreneurship, and those spaces. And when you create space for people to understand that there's more choice there, we will naturally drive more people into mining. And talking about how diverse it is, right? Mining quite often is still the underground miner and the geologist, who are exceptionally important. But there are over, I think we counted, one day, 162 jobs or something that we could come up with in an hour and a half lunch. And so there's a lot of careers, there's a lot of choices. And there is a responsibility on industry to reach out into communities and their partners to share that. There's a huge responsibility. Government needs to pick up that mantle in a much bigger way. And I think the media needs to be a little bit more honest and balanced in its presentation of the industry. We've got some legacy issues, but we've had some big strides. Canada is a global leader in regulation, in collaboration, in inclusion. We are near the top in this game. We got a long way to go, but I think the media needs to get a lot more honest about where we are today, and that will attract more women as well. So yeah, those would be the education pieces. But you could do a whole thing on this one, Bianca.
I'm going to jump in. I mean, one on Anne's comment about change in education, and coming from the home building industry, there's a serious shortage of trades, and the home builders and government associations are trying to get into high schools to say you can have amazing careers. So it is incumbent on the sector to raise that profile and to show that opportunity. From a personal perspective, the reason why I have continued and I enjoy it is the global. There is such international scope. I never thought that I would be learning and talking about Mongolia as an investment jurisdiction. For youth coming into this, no matter what their specific subject matter expertise, the fact that you get to work on world-class assets with business leaders around the world. And then there's the sustainability piece to motivate you and your own value proposition. What you get to do is helping local economies and help local talent not just be sustainable, but thrive.
I think what I would say is that there's so many opportunities in our world, in our mining space, for growth, development, and it behooves all of us to make people aware of what we do, so that they have the opportunity to choose mining as a career option.
Folks, there's so much more we could go into, and we still have some unanswered questions in the chat. Kimberly, who wanted to know about how this impacts women internationally, Juan looking at other industries, and Paloma asking how we can do more panels like this. I think they're all excellent questions, and I do look forward to addressing them at a future date. But I would like to leave us with one thought. What final words of advice would you give to the future women leaders in the mining sector? What would you tell them? I would love to start with Anne, if possible.
Darn, I was hoping to hear the other inspirational words to be inspired. Thanks, Bianca. What would I tell the next generation of women leaders? That the space is there for you to step into, and that people are primed for you to be there and try, and then make mistakes, mess it up, surround yourself with people to pick you up that you can trust, and do it again. I just think the opportunity for growth and change and transformation is here. And so if you are in any way contemplating a move or a change, whether that's, just asking for a raise or a shift in your organization, a shift in sectors, or a jump to the leadership spot, take the shot. People are dying for you to take the shot. And there are people that will catch you. If you miss this one, you can jump on the next one. That would be my advice.
So I think there are a couple of things here, and we have talked about some of the solutions for sure, but I think that there's one piece that's really important. First of all, I would say to the new entrants, don't be intimidated by a very male-dominated sector. There is room for you. There is room for lots. That's my observation. But the second part is, once you have made it, once you are a leader yourself, it's not enough to show that and be that role model passively. It's great to mentor and sponsor, but I think we all need to take it to the furthest level, which is around decision-making. Have we improved the policies to make the framework better? Have we improved the transparency around pay and the pay gap? Have we improved the policy around making it easier to retain women and attract new talent? Have we improved the policy around transparently posting new opportunities in a variety of places and not just passively on our own website just to say that we did? I think there's so much more we can do on the policy level to influence real change.
I think I would say be fearless. We've talked all throughout the panel today about all the different opportunities that have been presented to us and that will be presented to future recipients of being employed in this industry. But walk in with confidence and be fearless.
I like what Siloni said about don't be intimidated, and Brenda, be fearless, and trust that you belong. You belong in this industry. You belong in any part of this industry. And I would say that, one thing that I've learned, especially because it's been COVID for the past few years, don't stop mentoring, don't stop growing your group, your allies. Mentor and be mentored. That's what I would say.
I want to thank each and every one of you, Vanessa and Brenda, Siloni. I feel so grateful to be able to moderate this discussion in the same way that I felt so tremendously grateful when I entered into this industry to meet and be able to make such tremendous friends. And the warm, welcoming energy and aura that you folks put off is just so evident. I'm looking forward to the next one in May. But in the meantime, thank you all. Thank you for everyone who attended, and have a great rest of your Friday and a great weekend.